Okay, we're going to talk about how graphs of rational expressions behave. This is quite different from other graphing you've done, so we're going to just plot some points and work through these points and see if you can notice a general trend or behavior. And so let's go ahead and plug these x values in. If I were to plug in a 1 into 1 over x, 1 over 1 is 1, so I'm counting bigger so you can see it here. And 1 over 2 would be a half. 1 over 3, if I plug a 3 in for x, 1 over 3 would be 1/3. 1 over 4 is a fourth. And you can see that I would be approaching the x-axis here as an asymptote. We'll get infinitely close. And even out at 10, we'd be at 1/10. So we're going to get infinitely close to the y-axis down here. As we go the other way, if I were to go to 1 over 1/2, well, 1 over, if I add a half, I would actually go up to 2. At a third, I'd go up to 3. At 1/4 for an x valued, I'd end up at 4. And so the tendency as I get closer to 0 is for this curve to approach a positive infinity. It will get infinitely close to the y-axis but never touch. On the other extreme, which this is undefined, the restriction is that x cannot be equal to 0. So since I have this restriction, that's why I end up with the asymptote at x equaling 0, which is the y-axis. And so that is the one value that is dropped from the domain, is x cannot be a 0. And if we plot other values like a -1, well, 1 over a -1 is still a -1. And we're going to see the same tendency that a -2 will give me a -1/2. If I plug in a -3, I'd get a -1/3. At a -4 for x, I'd get a -1/4. So this curve again is going to approach the x-axis, but from the underside. And at an extreme, it'll be approaching 0. When I come the other way, a -1/2, 1 over a -1/2 would get me down to 2. 1 over a -1/3 would get me to a -3, and so on. I will approach the y-axis on the left-hand side. The closer I get to 0 for x, the closer I get to a -infinity for the y value. So 1 over x is undefined at x equaling 0, and as you approach x equaling 0 from the left, we see that the y values are tending to go to a -infinity. Yet when we approach 0 from the right, the y values are approaching a positive infinity. So the line x equaling 0 is a vertical asymptote, and that is where it's undefined. That is a restriction to the domain. And this is the picture that we have. It's actually 2 branches. And that's the graph of f of x equaling 1 over x.